darkness between stars was cold and empty. In that darkness floated the greatest war fleet the galaxy had ever seen. 1,200 ships hung in perfect formation, their metal hulls catching the faint light of distant suns. This was the Dominion Armada, pride of the Kelleradi Empire, and it had never known defeat. High Admiral Verthax stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. He was tall for his species, with gray-scaled skin and 4 arms that he kept folded behind his back. His yellow eyes watched the main viewing screen with cold satisfaction. Before him stretched his fleet, destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and dreadnoughts. Enough firepower to burn a planet to ash. In hours, they had done exactly that many times before. 9 species had fallen to the Armada. 40 worlds had burned. The Calrathi did not negotiate. They did not offer mercy. They simply arrived, demanded surrender, and destroyed anyone foolish enough to refuse. The galaxy had learned to fear them. Today, they were hunting new prey. The Milani were a peaceful species. They had no army, no warships. They were artists and poets, philosophers and dreamers. They lived on a beautiful blue world filled with forests and oceans. They had never harmed anyone. They were perfect victims. Verthax had received reports that the Milani were under human protection. This had given him pause, but only for a moment. The humans had been quiet for 30 years. They had retreated to their own space, content to trade and explore. Many believed they had grown soft, weak. The old stories about them were probably just lies told by cowards. Besides, what could the humans do? The Armada was invincible. Admiral called the sensor officer. We are approaching Milani space. All ships report ready for conquest. Wags allowed himself a small smile. Excellent. Begin the... He never finished his sentence. The sensor officer made a sound. It was not a word. It was something between a gasp and a scream, the kind of noise a person makes when they see death coming for them. His hands trembled over his controls. His scales turned pale. What is wrong with you? Verthax demanded. Report. The officer could not speak. He simply pointed at his screen with a shaking finger. Verthax looked at the main display. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Then the computer highlighted a small dot at the edge of the formation. A single ship, tiny compared to the massive Calrathi vessels. One ship. Verthax laughed. You scream over one ship. What as the computer finished its scan and displayed the identification? Terran Navy. Human warship. The bridge went silent. Every officer stopped moving. Every voice died in every throat. For a long moment, nobody breathed. Then the chaos began. Alarms screamed across the fleet. Communication channels exploded with panicked voices. Captains shouted questions. Crews cried out in fear. The perfect formation began to break apart as ships moved without orders, their pilots acting on pure terror. Verthax could not believe what he was seeing. His disciplined fleet, his proud warriors, were falling apart because of one small ship. Silence. He roared. Maintain formation. It is one vessel. But nobody was listening. Reports flooded in from across the Armada. On the destroyer Blade of Victory, half the crew had locked themselves in their quarters and refused to come out. On the carrier Endless Fury, a riot had broken out between those who wanted to fight and those who wanted to run. On a dozen ships, officers wept openly on their bridges. Verthax grabbed his communications officer by the collar. What is happening? Why is everyone afraid? The officer looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. Admiral, do you not know? Have you not heard the stories? Stories. What stories? About the humans. About what they do. About what they are. Verthax released him. He had heard some things, yes, rumors, whispers, tales told by drunken soldiers in dark corners. But he had dismissed them as fantasy, exaggeration, lies created by weak species to explain their failures. Looking at his crumbling fleet, he began to wonder if he had been wrong. The human ship did not move. It did not attack. It simply sat there at the edge of the formation, silent and still, watching, waiting. That was somehow worse than any attack. Verthax turned to his tactical officer. "Scan that vessel. Tell me everything." The officer's hands shook as he worked. It is a destroyer class. Old model. Minimal crew. Standard weapons." A T paused. "Admiral, we outnumbered them 1,200 to 1. We should destroy it easily. Then why are you afraid?" The tactical officer could not answer. He just stared at the screen, watching that tiny dot, and his whole body trembled. Verthax felt something cold crawl up his spine. He had conquered worlds. He had burned cities. He had watched billions die without feeling anything but pride. He did not know fear, but looking at that small, silent ship, he felt something he had never felt before. Doubt. The human ship just floated there, alone against 1,200 enemies. And somehow Verthax knew with absolute certainty that this was not a mistake. The humans had not sent one ship because they were weak or foolish. They had sent one ship because one ship was enough. He just did not understand. Why? Not yet. But he would learn. Before this day was over, High Admiral Verthax would learn exactly why the galaxy feared humans. He would learn why grown warriors wept at the sight of their ships. He would learn why species that had fought wars for thousands of years surrendered the moment humans arrived. He would learn everything, and the lesson would cost him more than he could possibly imagine. Verthax called an emergency meeting in his war room. His senior officers gathered around the holographic display table, their faces pale and their hands unsteady. These were warriors who had seen countless battles. They had killed without mercy and conquered without hesitation. Now they looked like frightened children. "Explain," Verthax commanded. "Tell me why my fleet is falling apart over one ship." For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then old Admiral Cothrell stepped forward. He was the oldest officer in the fleet. His scales faded to almost white, his body bent with age. He had fought in more wars than anyone could count. "You are young," High Admiral Cothrell said softly. "You rose to power during the peace years. You have never faced the humans in battle." "I have heard the stories," Verthax replied. "Fairy tales to scare new recruits. They are not fairy tales." Cothrell's voice was hard. "I was there. I saw what they did. I watched friends die in ways I cannot describe. I still see their faces when I close my eyes." The old admiral touched the display, and images appeared. Battle reports, casualty numbers, video recordings that made several officers look away. 30 years ago, we tried to take human space," Cothrell began. "We sent a fleet of 200 ships to test their defenses. We found a small human outpost on a moon, just a research station with 50 scientists and one frigate to protect them." He paused, his jaw tight with old memories. One frigate. We laughed. We sent 30 destroyers to remove it, while the rest of the fleet moved on. Those 30 destroyers never reported back. Verthax frowned. "What happened?" "The frigate fought them. One ship against 30. It should have died in minutes. Instead, it killed 8 of our destroyers and damaged 12 more. When we finally destroyed it, we found that the crew had been fighting with broken bones, burnt skin, and empty lungs. Their captain gave orders until the moment his heart stopped. They never retreated. They never surrendered. They fought until there was nothing left." The war room was silent. "That was not the worst part," Cothrell continued. "The worst part came 3 days later. The main human fleet arrived. We outnumbered them 4 to 1. We had bigger ships, more weapons, better technology. We thought we would win easily." His voice dropped to a whisper. "We lost 147 ships in 6 hours. The humans lost 19. They did not fight like any species we had seen. They were creative, unpredictable. They used tactics that should not have worked, but somehow did. They turned asteroids into weapons. They rammed our ships with their own. One human captain flew his burning vessel into our ammunition supply and smiled as he died. Verthax felt his throat go dry. Why? Why would they do such things? Because we threatened their people. Keith Rawl looked at him with ancient, tired eyes. Humans do not fight for territory or resources or glory. They fight for each other, for their families, for their friends, for complete strangers they have never met. They will burn themselves alive to protect someone they love. They will sacrifice everything if they believe the cause is right. Another officer spoke up. Tell him about Proxima. Kithral nodded slowly. The siege of Proxima, a human colony world. The Vetheri Collective sent 500 ships to take it. One human garrison stood against them. 3,000 soldiers against an army of millions. How long did they last? 11 days. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. 11 days with no sleep, no supplies, no hope of rescue. When reinforcements finally arrived, only 200 humans were still alive. They had fought with empty guns, with knives, with their bare hands. The Vetheri lost 50,000 soldiers, taking a single city. They won the battle, but lost the war. The cost was too high. They never attacked human space again. Verthax turned away from the display. His mind was racing. These are old stories. The humans have been peaceful for 30 years. Perhaps they have changed. They have not changed. This voice came from the intelligence officer, a thin Kelrathi named Solvex. They have simply been waiting, watching. They stopped expanding, not because they grew weak, but because they saw no need for war. They protect their allies and ask for nothing in return. The Milani are their friends. The Milani are weak farmers and artists, and the humans love them for it. The Milani gave humanity art and music and poetry during their darkest times. The humans would die before they let anything happen to them. Solvex pulled up a new image, the human warship floating in the darkness. That vessel is the TNS Resolute. It is old. It has a crew of only 43. By any measure, it should be no threat to us. Then why is it here alone? Solvex hesitated. I believe it is a test, a question. The humans are asking us how much we want this. They are giving us a chance to leave, and if we do not leave, nobody answered. Nobody needed to. Verthax stared at the image of the small ship. 43 humans against 1,200 Kelrathi warships. It was madness. It was suicide. Or was it? The humans had done impossible things before. They had won battles they should have lost. They had survived situations that should have killed them. They had turned defeat into victory through sheer, stubborn refusal to die. What did they know that he did not? What were they planning? Why were they so confident? The questions burned in Verthax's mind, and somewhere out in the darkness, 43 humans waited patiently for his answer. They had all the time in the world. He was beginning to realize that he did not. Verthax called a council of war. The holographic images of every surviving captain flickered into existence around the war room. Some looked angry. Some looked afraid. Many looked like they had not slept in days, their eyes hollow and their scales dull with exhaustion. The fleet had already lost nearly 100 ships, not to battle, but to desertion, mutiny, and madness. 900 ships remained. Still more than enough to crush one human destroyer. We must decide, Verthax announced. Do we fight or do we flee? The arguments began immediately. Admiral Cathrell spoke first, his old voice heavy with warning. We should leave. The humans do not make empty threats. If they say they will destroy us, they mean it. They have something planned, some trap we cannot see. One ship, shouted Captain Drovik of the Crimson Blade. One tiny ship. Are we really such cowards that we will run from one ship? We are the Dominion Armada. We have never retreated. Never. We have never fought humans either, Keith Rawl replied. I have. You have not. Trust me when I tell you, this is not a fight we want. The old man is a coward, sneered another captain. His blood has gone cold. He sees ghosts everywhere. I see the truth. Kethral's image flickered as he slammed his fist on his console. I see a fleet that has already lost 1/10 of its strength to nothing but fear. What will happen when the real fighting starts? Half our crews will break. They will flee or freeze or turn on each other. We are not ready for this. Vertax raised a hand for silence. What about the human ship? Why are they so confident? Intelligence Officer Savex answered. I believe the Resolute is a sacrifice, a delaying tactic. The human Second Fleet is stationed 3 days away at normal speed. If they left when the Resolute arrived, they could be here within hours using emergency jump drives. You are guessing, Drelvik accused. Yes, but it is a reasonable guess. The humans would not send one ship to fight 1,200 unless that ship had a purpose beyond fighting. They are buying time. Every hour we wait, their fleet gets closer. Vertax considered this. Then we should attack now. Destroy the Resolute before reinforcements arrive. That is exactly what they want, Cathriel protested. If we destroy that ship, we give them a reason for war. Right now, they have only made a threat. If we fire first, we become the aggressors. They will hunt us across the galaxy. They will never stop. They are one species. We are an empire, a Tia. They defeated the Vethari Collective, which was larger than our empire. They fought the crystalline hegemony to a standstill, and the hegemony had technology centuries beyond our own. They do not lose, Admiral. They simply find ways to win that nobody else would consider. The debate raged on. Hours passed. The countdown continued. Some captains argued for attack. They spoke of honor, of reputation, of the shame that would follow them if they ran from a single ship. They reminded everyone of the Milana week, helpless, full of resources, worth taking. Were they really going to abandon such an easy conquest because of human threats? Other captains argued for retreat. They spoke of the crew losses, the chaos spreading through the fleet, the impossible odds they might face if human reinforcements arrived. They reminded everyone of the stories, the battles where human victory should have been impossible but happened anyway. Was any conquest worth that risk? Versax listened to both sides. He thought about his career, his reputation, his legacy. He had built the Armada into the most powerful force in the galaxy. He had never known defeat. His name was spoken with fear and respect across 100 worlds. If he retreated now, all of that would mean nothing. He would be remembered as the admiral who ran from one ship. His enemies would mock him. His allies would abandon him. His own people would call him a coward. He could not accept that. Enough, he said finally. I have made my decision. The war room fell silent. Every captain leaned forward, waiting. We will attack, Verthox announced. We will destroy the human ship and continue to Milani space as planned. The humans have had their 30 years of peace. They have grown soft. Their reputation is built on old battles and older legends. It is time to show the galaxy that the Kelrathi Empire fears nothing. Kethral's image flickered. Admiral, I beg you, the decision is made. Verthax cut him off. All ships will form attack formation. We will destroy the Resolute with overwhelming firepower. Nothing can survive what we are about to throw at them. Not even humans. He looked at the assembled captains, some proud, some terrified, all committed to the path he had chosen. This is our moment, Verthax said, his voice rising. This is our chance to prove that the Dominion Armada is still the greatest power in the galaxy. Today, we will show everyone, including the humans, what we are capable of. He raised his fist in the traditional Kalrathi salute. For the Empire, for glory, for victory. Captains echoed the salute. Others did not. But it did not matter anymore. The decision was made. The orders were given. The fleet began to move into attack position on his private channel. Old Admiral Cothrell whispered a prayer to gods he had stopped believing in long ago. Out in the darkness, 43 humans watched the Armada prepare to attack, and Captain Sarah Chen smiled. She had been waiting for this. They all had. 6 hours passed. The Armada began to fall apart. Verthax watched from his bridge as discipline crumbled like sand in a storm. The human ship had done nothing. It had not fired a single weapon. It had not moved a single inch. It simply floated there in the darkness, silent and patient, and that silence was destroying his fleet more effectively than any attack. The first deserters fled after the second hour. 3 destroyers broke formation without warning. Their captains sent no messages, gave no explanations. They simply turned their ships around and ran toward deep space at maximum speed. Verthax ordered them to stop. They did not respond. He ordered other ships to pursue them. Nobody obeyed. Cowards. Verthax roared. They are cowards. But even as he said the words, he understood. Those captains were not cowards. They were survivors. They had looked at the human ship and done the math. They had decided that their lives were worth more than their honor. He could not even blame them. The second incident was worse, on the heavy cruiser Fist of Domination. The crew mutinied. 200 soldiers turned against their officers, locked them in the cargo bay, and seized control of the ship. They broadcast a surrender message on all frequencies, begging the humans for mercy. We do not want to fight. The message said. We were following orders. Please, we surrender. We surrender. The human ship did not respond. It did not acknowledge the surrender. It did not do anything at all. But somehow, that made the mutineers even more afraid. They began to argue among themselves. Some wanted to flee. Others wanted to destroy their own weapons as proof of peaceful intentions. The arguments turned to fights. The fights turned to violence. By the 4th hour, half the crew of the Fist of Domination was dead. Killed not by humans, but by their own people. Verthax received reports from across the fleet. On ship after ship, crews were breaking down. Some fought each other, some hid. Some simply sat at their stations and stared at nothing, their minds overwhelmed by fear they could not control. One medical officer sent a desperate message. The crew is sick, she said. Not physically, mentally. They cannot think clearly. They see danger everywhere. They hear human voices in the ventilation systems. They believe the humans have already boarded us, that they are hiding in the shadows, waiting to strike. I have sedated 40 crew members, but there are not enough drugs for everyone. Hysteria. That was what the doctors called it. A sickness of the mind that spread from person to person like a disease. Fear was contagious. The Armada was infected. The worst incident happened on the battleship. Thunder of the Ancestors. The crew convinced themselves that the humans had placed a bomb on their ship. They searched everywhere: the engine room, the cargo holds, the living quarters. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. But they did not believe the searches. They thought the bomb was hidden too well. They thought they were already dead. The captain tried to restore order. His crew killed him. They killed anyone who told them to stay calm. Then they turned on each other, each person convinced that their neighbor was secretly working for the humans. When the killing stopped, the thunder of the ancestors went dark. No signals, no life signs. Just a dead ship floating among the fleet. A tomb for 300 Kalrathi who had been killed by their own terror. And still the human ship did nothing. Verthax stood alone on his bridge, gripping the railing until his claws drew blood from his own palms. He had commanded this fleet with an iron will. He had believed himself unbreakable. Now he watched his armada destroy itself, and he felt something cold and terrible growing in his chest. Doubt had become fear. Fear was becoming despair. Then the message came. It arrived on all frequencies, broadcast to every ship in the fleet. A simple audio transmission. No video, no identification. Just a human voice, calm, quiet, and cold as the void itself. Tension. Calrathi, Armada. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Navy ship Resolute. You have entered space protected by the Terran Accord. The Milani are our friends. We will not allow them to be harmed. Werthax leaned forward, his heart pounding. You have 12 hours to withdraw from this system. This is not a request. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning. If you are still here when the time expires, we will remove you. There will be no second chances. There will be no mercy. The message paused. When it continued, the voice was somehow even colder. You have heard stories about us. I want you to know that every story is true. Every nightmare you have heard is real. We do not bluff. We do not threaten. We simply act. You have seen what fear can do to your fleet. Imagine what we can do. Another pause. 12 hours. Choose wisely. The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge. Every officer stared at Werthax, waiting for orders, waiting for leadership, waiting for someone to tell them what to do. Werthax said nothing. He looked at the human ship on his displaced maul, lone, impossibly confident. 43 humans against 1,200 warships. They should be terrified. They should be running. Instead, they had given him an ultimatum. They had given him a choice. Leave, can live with the shame of retreat. Stay and face whatever came next. 12 hours. The countdown had begun. 900 ships opened fire at once. The void burned white. Thousands of weapons unleashed their fury upon a single target. Energy beams cut through space like knives of light. Missiles streaked forward in clouds so thick they blocked out the stars. The combined firepower of the Dominion Armada struck the TNS Resolute with enough force to crack a moon. For 3 terrible seconds, nobody could see anything. The sensors were blinded. The screens showed only static. Every Calrathi in the fleet held their breath, waiting for confirmation that the human ship was destroyed. Then the static cleared. The Resolute was still there. Its shields flickered like dying flames. Its hull was blackened and torn. Fire poured from a dozen wounds in its metal skin, the oxygen burning as it escaped into space. By any reasonable measure, the ship was dying, but it was not dead. And then it moved. The Resolute shot forward with a speed that should have been impossible for a damaged ship. It dove straight into the Calrathi formation, so close to the larger vessels that they could not fire without hitting each other. Its weapons came alive, not the powerful cannons of a battleship, but the precise, deadly strikes of a predator that knew exactly where to bite. The first destroyer died in seconds. The Resolute's main gun punched through its reactor, and the ship exploded in a ball of blue fire. Before the debris had finished spreading, the human vessel was already gone, spinning toward its next target. Werthax screamed orders. Destroy it. All ships, concentrate fire. But his fleet was panicking. Ships crashed into each other, trying to avoid the Resolute's attacks. Weapons fire flew wild, striking friendly vessels. The perfect formation became chaos. The chaos became a massacre. The Resolute moved through the fleet like a ghost. It seemed to know where every shot would come before it was fired. It dodged and weaved and struck with terrible precision. A cruiser's engines exploded. A carrier's flight deck was torn open, spilling fighters into the void. A dreadnought's ammunition storage detonated, taking 3 nearby ships with it. And the Resolute kept fighting. Its shields died. Its armor melted. Pieces of its hull ripped away and tumbled into space. But it would not stop. The humans inside that burning wreck refused to die. They fought with systems that should not have worked. with weapons that should have been destroyed, with bodies that should have given up long ago. Verthax watched in horror as 43 humans did what 1,200 Kelrathi ships could not stop. Then the Resolute's weapons went silent. It was finally out of ammunition. For a moment, the Kelrathi fleet felt hope. The human ship was defenseless, wounded, finished. The Resolute turned toward the nearest carrier and accelerated to full speed. No, Redox whispered. They would not. They would. They did. The Resolute rammed the carrier at maximum velocity, piercing its hull like a spear through flesh. The human ship drove deep into the carrier's heart, and then in purpose. With full intense reactor exploded. The blast killed both ships instantly. A wave of fire spread outward, damaging a dozen vessels nearby. The TNS Resolute was gone, along with every human on board. But they had done their job. The Kelrathi fleet was in ruins. Ships burned everywhere. Captains screamed contradictory orders. Half the vessels were trying to flee. The other half were shooting at shadows. Their crews convinced that more human ships were hiding nearby. And then the real nightmare arrived. Space itself seemed to tear open as massive vessels emerged from faster-than-light travel. The Terran Second Fleet had come 30 dreadnoughts, 50 cruisers, 100 destroyers. They were not rushing. They were not panicking. They moved into formation with calm, terrible precision. The voice of Admiral Marcus Stone filled every Kelrathi communication channel. This is the Terran Second Fleet. The TNS Resolute has been avenged. Your fleet will now be destroyed. If you wish to surrender, do so immediately. This is your only chance. Some Kelrathi ships surrendered. Many did not have the opportunity. The human fleet struck with overwhelming force, cutting through the broken armada like farmers harvesting wheat. There was no battle. There was only slaughter. Verthax watched from his bridge as his flagship burned around him. His crew was dead. His fleet was gone. Everything he had built over decades of conquest had been erased in a single hour. A human destroyer appeared beside his dying ship. Marines prepared to board. Why? Verthax whispered to no one. How? It was only one ship. Damn, but he understood now. That was the answer. That was the lesson. One ship had been enough to test them. One ship had been enough to break their spirit. One ship had been enough to delay them until the real fleet arrived. And one ship had been enough to show the galaxy what humans were willing to sacrifice. 43. Humans had died so that millions of Milani could live. The Kelrathi would never have done that. No species would have done that. Only humans. The boarding party found Verthax still standing on his bridge, staring at the wreckage of his empire. They took him alive. He would spend the rest of his days in a human prison, thinking about what he had learned. Out of 1,200 ships, 47 survived to surrender. The Dominion Armada ceased to exist. The Milani were never threatened again. And, across the galaxy, species who had forgotten the old warnings began to remember. Parents told their children. Teachers told their students. Soldiers told their comrades. Never corner a human. Never hurt what they protect. Never assume you understand what they will do. And never ever think that one ship means you are safe. Because, for humans, one ship is not a weakness. It is a promise. And humans always keep their promises.